So you heard about Jason Putorti a little bit. So I've known Jason since he was a student back here. It seems like it was not so long ago now, Jason, but it was quite some time ago. He graduated in 2002 from Arts and Sciences, from Computer Science. And together we worked on a startup together, which you guys all know now as niche.com. But at the time it was called College Prowler. And we worked really hard. I helped incubate them. Luke was my student, and that was over at the other university. But Jason came on and designed the first interface for that product. And then he went on and moved out to Silicon Valley, so we lost him. He's not originally from Pittsburgh, but he moved out to Silicon Valley and he did a whole bunch of really awesome things. First of all, he became chief designer for Mint.com. Any of you use Mint.com? I'm a user. I've been using it for a really long time, and I really want to thank you because it's a really easy interface. It's like, wow. It's awesome. Then he became a designer in residence for some Silicon Valley venture firms, just like a small one, like Bessemer Ventures, one of the largest and most successful venture firms in the world. So he's done a number of those kind of things. He's done part of a bunch of startups out there, 500 startups that many of you have heard of: Vodazone, Brigade, Quickie, Tap Canvas, Wavy, COR, Cavalry, and Flocker. He's he's also a 30 under 30 by Forbes. And I just really am very glad that we were able to call Jason up. Thank you, LinkedIn, for us being able to stay in touch all these years, right? Like I linked in and it's like, hey, Jason, how you doing? You want to come back to Pitt? And he goes, yep. And I go, oh, awesome. You know, buy your ticket now. So, Jason, come on up. I don't know about our slides. He has slides. It's freaking out. Yeah. What? Hey, you know what? While the computer, since we have a couple slides for Jason. Jesse, are you still here? Jesse, did he go? I was going to say he could come on back and start making fun of us again. I'm not quite sure what to do. Can you do your presentation?
I got a good story.
All right. Awesome. We're just going to let that happen.
Right. So I did prepare some slides. I just kind of a couple lessons learned. Really excited to be back here. Really appreciate the Randall family. 100,000 is a pretty good amount of prize money. Back when Mint won the TechCrunch 50 back in 2007, that was 50K. So for 100 right here in Pittsburgh without leaving campus, let's do another round of applause. Really appreciate it. And it is incredible to come back to Pitt and see everything that's been done over the last, it's been 15 years. I graduated 15 years ago. It's crazy. But back then, there wasn't really any of this here. And I'll tell you guys a little bit how I got started in entrepreneurship. One of the most important things, I think, is to just have someone in your life that doesn't think you're crazy for doing it in the first place. And I really didn't, I didn't understand that. I took that for granted. My dad has a law firm, which you may not think of as startup, but he has his own firm. He has a business. He does payroll, all that stuff. And I was doing websites since I was a kid. And for him to say, hey, let's incorporate that, that was just second nature to him. I'm like, okay, yeah, let's make a company. I'm 16 years old, but let's go file that and start going. So I was doing that while I was a student. And I fell in love with Pittsburgh back in 1999. I came to a summer program at CMU for college, for high schoolers. It was like this pre-college summer thing. It was a lot of fun. And my RA was a guy named Joey, and he was a hustler. He was crazy. So he put himself through school. This was back in the early, this is 99, early 2000s. This was back in the early .com days when there was stuff like collegecampusclub.com and all these different websites where you could make money. Like they were paying out money for signing up students and affiliate revenue and the rest of it. So he would game all of this, and he put himself through Carnegie Mellon doing this. One of the other things he did to make money was he was from New York. He actually went to the UN school. He's a really bright guy. He decided to go drive to New York every weekend and buy knockoffs from Chinatown of like this thing called Iceberg. They were like jeans with cartoon characters put on. I did not understand it, but he would go and get these things from New York City, bring them back to Pittsburgh, and he sold them on eBay for like a 10x markup. It was incredible. But Joey would do like anything to put himself through school, and it was incredible to me. So I met him at pre-college and fell in love with Pittsburgh, loved it, became a Pirates fan, really into everything in town. I always thought I was going to go to school in Boston. Actually, had my heart set on it, but I came here and I was hooked. So I came back to, Joey called me up. I was back in high school, and he's like, hey, I got this thing that I want you to do. Can you come down to Pittsburgh? And I'm like, all right, sure, I'll come down to Pittsburgh. I'm in high school. He's like, I got this guy named Mr. Ham who wants a new website, and it's for a student project. So he calls me down to do an entirely new website and system for an auto dealership. It was crazy. But we stayed in touch, and Babs taught, actually, Joey and Luke in one of her classes at CMU. And the idea was to do one book per college. They were college students that just come off of that experience. That was what they knew. Let's do a book per college like Cliff Notes. So this becomes a thing, and it really became a thing when Babs got us into this business plan competition in Muncie, Indiana. That's what we had to do. We went to Ball State University. We had to fly to Indianapolis, take a car to Muncie, and we did this thing. This is like the first thing we did as a team. And Babs doesn't want me to tell you this, but yeah, like we all came together on this trip, and it was an interesting time. We got some good feedback on our idea. We didn't win, but the whole experience actually pushed us towards doing this for real. But yeah, one of the things that happened was I remember that same hustler, head of business development at College Prowler. Luke was the CEO, and I was the design and web guy. I remember knocking on Babs' door at about 5 in the morning, the day we were supposed to be up here and basically accept our prize or whatever. And I said, Babs, Joey's in jail, and our car has been impounded. I posted bail. What do you want to do? So Babs, we all walked into the lobby. We got a cab, which there aren't really cabs in Muncie, Indiana. Everyone's looking at us like, what is going on here? We go get Joey out of jail. We come back and get Luke, who's asleep, and then we go and accept our prize. It was really something. But these are like experiences that bring a team together. It was really interesting. And yeah, back then, Babs was just one adjunct faculty at CMU. She was working out of a biotech incubator, and she got us together and did it. And now she's over here and has built this tremendous thing. So really appreciative for Babs for making that happen. She convinced CMU they didn't want to give us the money to go do that trip, and yeah, that company's still going. So
cool.
Yeah.
We're back up and running.
Great. Let's see here. Sorry, I'm going to move this so I can see. Maybe not. All right, I think we got this. All right, so Babs talked a little bit about my personal story. So, thanks. Did College Prowler for a little bit, and back then we couldn't get venture funding for anything, so we were bootstrapped. Joey was, of course, selling knockoffs. This other guy, Chris Mason, was like figuring out what was hot on Christmas, buying a lot of it and reselling it on eBay. One of the girls was waitressing. I was doing websites. We total bootstrap, couldn't raise any money from anybody, and we had a pretty decent product. It was crazy. We decided to do books back then because it was right. Actually, the original idea was a website, and then the .com crash happened. It looks like, oh, we can't do a website. We must do books. Which have costs and the whole rest of it, and just sell books and do it in Barnes & Noble. So we ended up going that route, and it's since come full circle, which is really funny. But I ended up starting a web design firm here in Pittsburgh, which, service. It was like hand-to-mouth, hand-to-hand combat, out there trying to close deals. We were a bunch of, 21-year-olds and trying to compete with design firms. So we were constantly like trying to undercut, and, it was really an amazing learning experience. But I wanted to stop the rat race, get out of that, and go build a product. So tried to do that. One of the lessons learned, if you're going to take an investor, which I did, I met a very well-respected businessman, decided to bring him on as an investor. Do your diligence. I trust people too easily, but you got to do some diligence, whether that's co-founders, especially investors. but go ask for references, and I make this mistake over and over again. So don't make that mistake that I did. The whole thing fell apart, at which time I loved Pittsburgh, but decided to go out to Silicon Valley and see what was going on. And you know, there are hustlers out there too. Like the first guy, like I had a friend who went to Stanford. First guy that came in who he introduced me to, he didn't even introduce himself. He just said, "You want a job?" I said, "I don't know, maybe." That's how I got involved in Mint.com, and then did that for a little bit. Ended up selling that to Intuit, and went over to a VC firm where I learned a lot. I got to sit in all the partner meetings. We got to look at all the startups and see kind of what was working and what doesn't. And you know, I'm going to stick around and be happy to talk to anyone who wants to talk to me about that stuff. And then I went off on sort of a political vision quest for about 5 years. Tried to fix politics, which is a really hard problem. Yeah, and here I am. So I'm going to get into this here a little bit. All right, so like business lessons 101 here. First thing you have to do is find a problem, which does seem to be harder than it sounds, because I get pitched a lot, you know, all the time, and you know, sometimes they're boil the ocean type problems, or sometimes they're problems that maybe only you have. If you think you have a problem that you want to solve, I would encourage you to reconsider and believe that you have a hypothesis and not an actual problem. And you have to get out there and talk to people. You need to find a problem that a lot of people have, or there need to be a lot of people like you, which is where a lot of people end up starting. And then sometimes people come up to me and say, "Oh, what about Twitter? You know, they're not really solving anything." Twitter was a fluke. Somebody created it by accident. It happened to take off. They're still having problems making that a business. So I encourage you to go out there, find a small problem, and go after it. This was a particularly interesting example in my past. So once I was kind of closing out at Mint, I got really into politics. It was right around the 2008 election, and I was out in Silicon Valley. I'm kind of doing tech stuff. I'm thinking politics is interesting. So what can I do in, you know, kind of to bring those two together? So I made this thing, which served no purpose to anybody, right? I was basically like watching Meet the Press, and I was reading all these different blogs. I'm like, wouldn't it be neat if I could do that in one place? And yeah, nobody really cares. Basically, I was like solving my own really weird problem, and it wasn't something that most people really struggled with. Most people don't feel the compulsive need to read 20 different blogs and consume every like bit of political news there is. The closest analog would be like a Bloomberg terminal, but I had no guiding North Star for this, right? I was a designer. I ran home to what I like to do, which was mock things up and move things around and make grid systems and whatever. But that's not really what design is. Design is going out, talking to people, identifying a problem, and having that North Star to keep bringing you back in and keeping you moving forward. Another thing about finding a good problem, you may have heard this before, you want a painkiller problem and not a vitamin problem, right? Lots of people, you get a headache, it hurts bad, what do you go get Advil. The vitamins, I don't necessarily need the vitamins, right? And when you're trying to ID problems, and if you're going out to a business, you're going out talking to customers, ask them what's the worst part of their day. It's a really great question, and where's that pain, and if you can kind of hone in on that, maybe you have something. People will pay to alleviate real pain, especially in business. If you have some kind of vitamin problem, realize that some people will get fired in certain industries for taking risks on just crazy technology. If you're not really solving a tough problem and something they can defend to their boss, they may be screwed and out of a job, especially the case in politics. This is something to me that just like screams vitamin problem, right? Like this is like a really like interesting looking product. It's got a nice looking design, but it's like, oh, now you can have one credit card that holds 10 different credit cards in it. It's like, yeah, so does a wallet. Like what in the world? It's like an engineer decided to come up with something that said, hey, I think I can do this, let's go do it, without really validating, wow, is this like a real pain point for people that like carrying 5 cards around or 3 cards, like that's really awful and that's worth like whatever it costs to do this. So again, one tool, you know, I'm a designer, one tool we use is behavioral segments, finding needs, pain points, and behaviors. That's what you have to do when talking to people. Building personas, it's not like, this is a mom, she's 35 years old, she lives in Dormont, and she does this and that. What are the needs, pain points, and behaviors? Build segments around them. Find patterns. And when you find a common pattern, that's a segment, and you can build a product for it. A lot of entrepreneurs I meet just don't spend a lot of time talking to people, and that is really like the most important thing. You can keep going and obviously pitching the big idea, but what the judges think and what most people think doesn't matter. Do your users like it? Do your customers like it? Keep talking to them. Keep refining over and over again. And one company I helped while I was at Bessemer, it's called Xerx, and it's no longer really around. They had to pivot to logistics, but one of the reasons they had to make that pivot was they wanted to make like Uber for parking. So like you could basically push a button and somebody would come and get your car. But they designed it exactly like Uber, which makes no sense, right? Like you're in your car and you're gonna hit the button and then you're gonna wait like 10 or 15 minutes for somebody on like a scooter to come and park your car. Like how does that even work? In rush hour, there's cars honking at you, there's cops that are gonna tell you to move. It makes zero sense. And when I honed in with them, okay, who's your most likely user and who's your best user? Oh, they're commuters that are coming in from Mountain View and they're trying to park on their job in San Francisco. And I said, okay, walk yourself through that entire routine. How does this product work for them as designed? Don't they need to book it before? And basically you're making the whole experience of this worse. And they're like, yeah, I guess we have to redo it. And they ran out of time and they had to pivot the business completely. It is crazy how far people get with building things without doing like stuff like this. Talking to customers, making a story, like here's what their day looks like, here's what they're doing, and maybe I'm going to solve with my product, I'm going to solve this one piece of it, and I'm going to do a really good job with that. Everyone has, or many people have the tendency to just try and solve everything. We must have all these features, we must do all that stuff. Somebody made the joke of minimum viable product. It's true. You should start small, figure out that most important pain point, and then solve it for people and see if it's worth any money. See if they'll actually pay for it. And how much they pay is when we talk about finding a market. Just what, like, will people be willing to pay, and then are there a lot of those people? Or if it's a small set of people, like probably a smaller set for industrial lubricants, but they're going to pay a lot of money, right? It's a big market. And another mistake I see a lot when people are pitching is, well, our product like disrupts like the $16 billion like X market. Like I hear this with political startups since people talk to me about those. I'm like, okay, well, 12 billion out of that 16 billion is spent on TV. So are you a cable company? Like what and no, they're a tools company and they do software, and that market is like this big. So it's like, okay, well, if you basically take the entire market, that's maybe $1 million and you have to get all of it, right? So some of these things, like, you got to consider the market you're really in and not just like look at the big number to put in your deck, right? And that's also what makes something venture fundable or not. This is like another one which I see a lot, right? What is actual value? Well, like, what are you creating in the world here, and does it have value? If the benefit isn't actually greater than the cost, then this product has no value. In fact, it has negative value. And you can consider benefits and costs in a number of ways. It's not just pure dollars. So, for example, if you put an app out there and it's not sufficiently compelling enough to get me to actually fill out the sign-up form, then that means like your cost is actually higher than your benefit, right? So that's an important one. It's how people make decisions every day. This is another tool that I think every startup entrepreneur should be familiarizing themselves with. It's called a positioning statement. And this should help you actually guide towards like an offering for a certain set of people. So if our target customer says have some problem, our product is a new category that provides solution to the above problem. Yvonne in the audience has seen a ton of these. She runs a market research firm, and you could talk to her about this later. And unlike the competition, we have this key differentiator. So in this statement, which has been around for a long time, this encapsulates like part of why you should exist as a business. And if you can't basically create a compelling statement like this, then you should keep refining and figure out where you fit in the marketplace. So like I already said, starting small is okay. Showing real traction on that tiny little bit and then getting a lot of people in there, that's actually much more valuable than having like a big complicated product that nobody's using. So that's an important one. I probably am running a long time, and I'm going to speed this up a little bit. One of the things that I see entrepreneurs not realizing they can do is that they should be learning cheaply, right? So one of those things is talking to a lot of users. Anything you can do to reduce risk for an investor is awesome, okay? So whether that's, hey, we validated our need by running a bunch of AdWords before we built anything, and we got all these people to click on it. That means you have demand, and you didn't have to build anything. I've seen people do this before. If you're going to do an app, you don't need to go get an engineer or design it in Sketch. You can actually sketch it all out, and you can put it in front of somebody, and you can basically like have them use it, and then you can move the little paper iPhone around this screen, and you can see how people use it, and you can watch them. And are they delighted? Are they excited by it? What's their reaction to it? So figure out how to learn cheap, and don't feel like you're stuck because you can't hire engineers or you can't get a designer or whatever. Anybody can talk to people. Anybody can draw. Not even, it doesn't have to be fancy. But learn as much as you can to take that risk off of the investors, right? And you can have a big vision, but you don't have to build it all at once. My favorite example is actually is Elon Musk, right? Like, he wants to go to Mars. I think if Sean Parker was doing that startup, he would just build the rocket and go, because he just likes to build everything at the same time. Elon decided, hey, maybe I should figure out how to get payloads into space first, and then maybe I should figure out how to land that on a drone ship. And then another, like, each successive step gets closer to the ultimate vision. So you don't have to try and tackle it all at once. Again, try and start small, iterate towards that vision. It'll also help you know what's broken, what's working right, what isn't. This is a great tool. I don't know if you guys have seen this. Dave McClure has given this talk over and over for the past decade at least. And this is called, it's called the R funnel. It's a metrics funnel. This is one of those ways where you start your product, you do your first iteration, and you take a look at what these numbers are. And if you're getting stuck at activation or retention, so for example, acquisition is somebody comes to the, I'm speaking mostly of online stuff, but somebody comes to the front door of your website, and that's 100%, right? So you're starting from everybody that's coming in, you gotta get some people in there to start. Maybe activation is they've signed up, they've completed some action, and they're in the door. Retention might be they're coming back like on a regular basis. So a lot of people, if you get stopped here, okay, what's wrong? Make an adjustment, and then you look at your next cohort. And a lot of times Silicon Valley startups split up cohorts by like people that set up on day 1, day 2, day 3, each successive version. And you just keep iterating on this stuff until you have something. This is what Dropbox used to go from some dude's side project to a billion-dollar company. Was just relentless on this. In fact, he hired a head of a big shot head of marketing, and had to fire that person because like this, going back to this, was actually what drove their growth. Another really important thing to realize when you're doing a startup, a lot of people are tempted to just like spend money on Facebook ads and customer acquisition. None of that stuff matters if your word of mouth isn't working. If people aren't talking and like really excited and sharing your product by word of mouth, then this is just going to give you negative returns, and it won't help you out very much. And there's 2 really important questions to ask. These are, more talking to people, which I think that everybody doesn't do enough of. Grab 30 people that sign up on a given day. Why did you sign up? What was your motivation? How did you hear about us? And if they're starting to say like, hey, I got it from a friend, and not that I'm like an early adopter and I saw it somewhere, but like a friend told me about it and I thought it was pretty cool and I jumped in, that's a sign that you have a really good product and that you've crossed over the kind of early adopter part of tech adoption. I'm going to skip that one. Lastly, this. Be careful about taking venture capital. It is a death clock. If you don't have, basically, one of my last companies, we took VC. I went out and raised $1.5 million from Putorti and a bunch of other really great angels. And we had this idea, and the problem was that it wasn't sufficient capital basically to get us the traction we needed to raise the next round. So taking a VC is not always good. If you can do something smaller, if you can prove it out, do it if you believe that you've got something and you need that capital to get you to the next phase of your life cycle. And if you can't, then you may not have figured out a sustainable way to run the business, and it may just kill you before you can really do anything. So that's it, guys. Talk to me if you have any more questions, and thanks so much for listening.